most of human history, people have parented the way their parents and grandparents did, with culture providing the cues. We call this parenting 1.0.
For various reasons, parents began to question these approaches, and we started turning more and more to so-called experts to learn to parent. This was the beginning of parenting 2.0. This allowed for some real advances, but also a lot of confusion as we got further and further away from our natural parenting instincts.
Parenting 3.0 is about reclaiming those instincts and integrating them with our current understanding of child development. It brings together the wisdom of the past with the best scientific and psychological research of the present.
Parenting 3.0 isn't a fad or a quick fix. It's a set of principles that allows us to engage with our kids and life from an informed and empowered place.
I'm Jai Flicker.
And I'm Deb Blum.
Welcome to Parenting 3.0.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Parenting 3.0 show. So glad that you're here today, and we are going to be talking today about the 6 stages of attachment. And we left you last time kind of wondering what that was, and here we are today to fill you in on all the details. So I'm going to pass it on to Jai to take it away and just give us a little bit more background and go deeper into attachment theory with this lens today.
One of the things that really blew my mind about Neufeld's framework was that he has this, it's not just that we attach, there's different ways that we attach, and those ways evolve in an ideal situation. With the first 6 years of life, each year there's a different way that becomes possible to attach. He's very clear to point out that most of us don't get all the way through this progression without getting stuck along the way. And so for me, hearing about this really kind of was both interesting, helpful, but also personally illuminating in a somewhat, it wasn't challenging, it was just raw. It felt very raw because it was going to such core elements of my own life experience. So I think it's helpful to listen to this both through the lens of thinking about a child, but also thinking about one's own childhood. So here we go.
Yeah, and I think if you can't, I have a hard time holding both at the same time.
Yeah.
So you can always rewind and listen again I have a really hard time doing that. Some people are really good at holding both at the same time. For me, I have to think of me, think of my child. I sometimes even have to think about each child separately.
Yeah. And go, yeah. Interesting. I like it. Well, so when we're born, the first way that we attach is through the senses. And it makes kind of sense because that's kind of all we have at that point. We have the grasp reflex. We have our reflex to nurse, and that's to latch on, and we recognize our parents' voices as infants. And even the scent of our parents can be soothing. So this is our first way, and so for me with a 2.25-year-old, when I just want to make sure she's feeling connected and held emotionally, I will often hold her physically because I know that that's going to go back down to that foundation of attachment, and I'll just try to not just only physically hold her, but also in those moments when I'm really able to, I'll try to get as present as I can and just be with her and not be thinking about what I'm going to be doing next or anything else. I'll just try to be with her in a very simple kind of just connection. And for me, knowing that is a really primal way of providing something helps me settle into it a little bit more. I don't just feel like I'm doing nothing and not being productive, which is, in this fast-paced world, it can feel kind of contrary to our normal mode of action. So knowing that simple present just holding is really, really valuable, is helpful for me. Yeah. So that's phase 1, stage 1, age 1. And so then around age 2, the second form of attaching comes online. And this is it's not exact to the day, and it's, it can show up a little earlier or a little later, but it's sort of a rough approximation. But stage 2 is Neufeld calls sameness, and it has to do with mirroring, has to do with the acquisition of speech, of hearing something and then saying it back. There's the phrase monkey see, monkey do, and this is really going to the heart of this stage 2. So when little kids will put on big shoes and walk around, they're role playing and being you, and they're wanting to be like you, and that's a way that they this is why modeling is so useful, is because that's a very primal way of connecting, of attaching, and it feels good. So even like wearing a similar outfit can imply sameness, and you can see this in how teams will wear uniforms, or even fans of certain sports they'll don the jerseys, and then they'll feel kind of more connected to that person. And it's part of this idea of sameness. Now stage 3 has to do with group identity, and so the sports analogy also kind of works for that, where around age 3, stage 3, we start to be capable of identifying with a group, with a family, with a culture, and feeling loyal to that group. So our sense of belonging and to a group, and to feeling loyal to, and being a part of, and taking on the values of what that group stands for. You see the roots of things like being patriotic, or even nationalistic, or going back to the sports analogy, really being part of that fan base, or belonging to a club, or any sort of identity. Group identity has its roots in this stage 3 of attachment. I'm just going to keep rolling here.
Yeah, keep rolling.
So stage 4 is actually, Neufeld says, is a place that a lot of people don't ever actually fully get to. Not that they don't get to it at all, but that most people get hung up before stage 4 or at stage 4. And I feel like that was kind of true for me in some ways. Stage 4 has to do with feeling significant, personally significant, and so it's a new level of psychological attaching that is more. It brings with it more vulnerability. If you're just connected with the senses, okay, that's one thing. If you're just being similar and being part of a group, those are not as deeply psychological forms of attaching, but feeling significant. And it's not just in the abstract. This is the key distinction. It's not just, oh, I feel important. It's that I feel important to you, to my primary attachment figure, right? Or figures. And that is a really important but really vulnerable kind of attachment. So for me, right as I was turning 4, my little sister was born. And so right as I was, this is why I was so kind of rocked by Neufeld's presentation, because I started thinking, wow, like right as my need to feel significant was coming online, and I felt very significant to my parents up until then. The spotlight sort of shifted to the new little baby that just entered the scene, and so I realize why that was such a hard thing for me. I mean, I think that's hard at different ages for different reasons, but it kind of really made sense. So I won't go too far into that right now, but that's an example of where I feel like I got hung up. And so I had to go back and do some work around stage 4 in order to really get deeper into stages 5 and 6, which I'll talk about momentarily here. But before I go on, do you want to add anything or say anything at this point?
No, but I do have a lot of curiosity because I can make up what I would imagine you would do to go back and kind of shore those up. But I want to, and maybe it can just be a future discussion, but it feels like I would love to go there with you about like what kinds of things you did. And then I kind of had that, I guess before that I had the question of like, oh, what happens when someone gets hung up? Like, what does it look like when someone gets hung up? And so that just might be a fun episode to do on like these 6 stages, what happens when someone gets hung up, and then what an adult can do. Yeah. I totally agree.
And just as a sort of foreshadowing sneak preview, I mean, part of what I personally did was I went and I had a session with someone who I felt like could hold the space for me to like go in and feel into the part of me that felt unmet in that way, and then to re-experience that and release some of the feelings and to kind of communicate with that part of me. And it was really helpful. It was really helpful.
That's cool. I love that little inner child work.
Yeah, exactly. It really was. Yeah. So if stage 4, or I should say when stage 4 gets sufficiently met, we will then move through into stage 5, which, if things are going well, will happen around age 5. And Neufeld talks about it as giving one's heart away. And so he says at this point, you'll see all like these spontaneous expressions of love and affection from the child to the parent or to the attachment figure, that are not just saying I love you, not just because that's something that you do, not something that, oh, I love you. If the parent says, I love you, and the child says, I love you too, it's sort of a sameness. Or it could even be like, this is a ritual that we do as a family. But this is like, I sort of joke because it's like, there's that thing of like, someone says, oh, I love you. And they're like, oh, I love you too. And they're like, no, man. I love you, but I really love you. And it's like, that's kind of like the exaggerated form of the stage 5, where it's like just professing love and like drawing lots of hearts and just, and Neufeld hasn't said the following, but I just can't, it just makes too much sense for me not to think that there's some connection here. And that is that when we are able to take in this significance, this sense of importance to someone, this in particular, we feel so loved that then that's stage 4, that then in stage 5 there's this sort of reciprocation of that. Like we're so filled that then we start spontaneously expressing actual love. So I love that.
That's really sweet. I know. And I wish I could remember those days more clearly. I'm feeling a little nostalgic and thinking I can kind of remember that, like that just big, like pouring over themselves, kind of like and that resulting in like, I guess I would say like spilling over with love, and then it outpouring towards me. Like just, I remember them like just running up and just having so much love. I don't have as many memories of that as I wish I did, though I know it happened a lot,
Yeah.
I just know because I can remember several feeling like they were sort of part of our days, like in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are sweet moments. Sweet moments for sure.
Because my 15 and 17-year-old, they don't usually do that very much right now.
What?
I know.
So when I heard this framework for the first time, I kind of was like, what? How could there be a stage after that? And, but apparently there is. And that sixth stage and sort of deepest level of attachment goes beyond just loving and giving one's heart away to what Neufeld calls being known. And so this is like deep psychological intimacy. And he describes it in various ways, but one way he gets at it is like, sharing one's innermost secrets. And so he'll say sort of like, if you ask, a child, like, who's your best friend, especially, I've always heard him talk about this in a gendered way with girls. Who's your best friend? The girl will say, oh, so-and-so. And if he says, well, how do you know? Like what, it's like, well, that's who I can share my secrets with. And so this is one way of getting at what this sixth stage of attachment is. But being known, and it's like, maybe I think of it more as, we have our public selves that we're willing to kind of show most people, but then there's some vulnerable, sensitive, private parts of ourselves that, not that we're ashamed to show that, or it could be though, but it also could just be like, it's just a very core part of us that we're not going to just bring out with anyone. And the people we bring that side out, that's a deep form of attaching. So that's the stage 6.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's like, it's rare that people will, that development will unfold so smoothly that we go through all 6 stages by age 6. Mm-hmm. And there's always room for, even if we have gone through them all, there's room for deepening in all the different categories. And so it's not a static concept. There's room for deepening and for growth and healing and all that good stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, because like you said, you were an adult when you went back and you looked at some, at level 4, stage 4.
Yes.
And then Neufeld talks about that he had to go back. I forget which one he said, but that so I think it's freeing to me to not feel like if you didn't get it done in those first 6 years, then you're just screwed. Yeah, sorry, dude, but you're just going to have attachment issues forever. And that I think it's just really helpful. There are 2 pieces and that I want to say about it. One is that I also don't feel, I know people say things like this, but I really do believe that we can hold the container for our children even when our attachment needs weren't met. Mm-hmm. So it is possible to actually fulfill your children's attachment needs without you being completely, I guess, shored up in every way. And at the same time that you can also shore them up. So it's both. So, there's 2 sides. Like you don't have to, in order to have held the container for your children. However, for your own enrichment of your life, to be able to live your life most fully, there's real value in going back and trying to find the pockets where maybe you didn't get those attachment needs met.
Absolutely. And I think a good example, I'll just use myself since I've already kind of started down that path, is that, I found that I always felt a little bit uncomfortable when I was getting off the phone, even with close family. Some people it would just be like, okay, bye, love you, nice talking with you. And they would say that. And I would always kind of like, and I still even have a little bit of, but there was a lot more of that discomfort of like, am I going to say that? Is it? And I would kind of go, why do I need to be that gushing? It's just a phone call. I mean, we talk on the phone all the time. It's no big deal. And so there was some kind of hesitancy there. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that after I went back and did this sort of healing work around my stage 4, that stage 5 did come online more fully, and now it's just more natural and not a big deal. And it's like, why wouldn't I say that? That's nice. And so there was a way in which I could see my own evolution happening real time. And it wasn't like an all or nothing thing. It wasn't like I couldn't and never expressed love or would never say I love you. It was just, it became more comfortable, more natural, more free flowing. And I think even then it progressed to stage 6 for me, where there was a way in which I became more comfortable opening up. And that was, it felt really raw and vulnerable at first and scary, and then, but also kind of good. And that was like me finally reaching that stage in a deeper way, and then like leaning more into that, continued to feel good and less vulnerable, more comfortable, and just, I think, made for a richer life, a richer experience. So this is just one person's journey with working with with this construct, but I have found it to be personally very helpful. I'll say that.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And it's really helpful for me. And there's a way that I have not looked at that in this framework. So when I was like, when the kids were young and I thought of myself practicing attachment theory, but it was actually probably more attachment parenting, I didn't have a lot of the theory behind me. And I didn't know these things. And so I didn't watch my children go through. I can only in retrospect see places, and my brain is, even in this conversation, I'm kind of going like, oh, do I remember that? Do they do that? Where are they? Where are their like gaps and holes? And so I'm practicing some self-compassion too at the moment, just because I'm not sure, and I'm wondering with the kids, just like where are they? Anyway, that's one thing. But I will say I've done a lot of work around inner child and going back and like taking a look at places where, it's hard for me to be fully myself or maybe be as expressive but I've never looked at it this way, and I'm sort of inspired to go back and look at the 6 stages and just say, well, what places might I have gotten a little stuck? Where do I need to do a little bit of work? Because I think there are a lot of people who really feel that they don't feel like they can completely show up as themselves. They don't feel like they have permission to be known that much, or there's some way that maybe like that sense of maybe it's even at 4, the significance place. Have I ever really been significant to someone? Am I significant to myself? Because ultimately I think that's what we have to be, is, do I feel significant to myself? And I think that there are probably a lot of people who are struggling with this. I know there are a lot of people who are struggling with this, but that to see it in this way, and to actually make it more just normal, like it's okay. This doesn't have to be pathologized here. Like this isn't a sickness. This is just like, oh my gosh, look at that. That probably didn't happen for me. Oh, but there's actually a way to be able to actually clean that up a little bit. And fill in those gaps. I love that. I mean, what I'm thinking about is, because with this day and age, if we do shift our focus a little bit towards kids, and I'm thinking about teens right now, about Instagram and about social media, right? And it helps, this framework really helps to explain some of the drive there. So and this was one of these mind-blowing things, among many, that Neufeld offers. And he says that when, and I'm going to use the need for significance, because I think it is, I don't know if this is just because since I got stuck there, I feel like it's a common place where people get hung up. I think it is. I get the sense it's a very common place.
Yes. But so Neufeld says that if we don't get that need fully met, which is like very common, it becomes depersonalized. And what that means is, instead of us wanting to feel like we matter to this particular person or these few attachment figures, we'll just want to be significant in general. And so then we start seeking to, find ways to feel important. And this can lead to sort of a narcissistic thing, or a self-importance, or just an attempt to sort of just get attention from anyone.
Yeah.
And I think, social media really lends itself to that depersonalized attachment, right? Because it's sort of like, even like sort of just the desire to be sort of famous, right? Even in a small kind of way, is like, I want to be sort of adored by the masses, or to be popular is another. That was definitely a way that it manifested for me. I wanted to be popular. I wanted to be well liked. I wanted to be sort of significant to just a bunch of people, because I knew that was missing. And so I thought, well, if everyone likes me, then that's going to be about as good as it can be, right? Yeah. But the truth of the matter is no. This is why we see so many famous people self-destruct, is because no amount of depersonalized adoration actually satisfies the need to matter to someone. Yeah. So from a parental perspective, let's say if you're out there and you have a teenager, and I see this more with girls than with boys, but it could be either one. And you see your child sort of seeking attention more than you feel like is healthy, but you don't know what to do about it. One place to start is to start communicating on a regular basis and being very explicit about how much your child matters to you. And that can take lots of different forms, but communicating that message explicitly can activate the attachment connection and start to fulfill that. And all of a sudden the hunger to get that sort of depersonalized significance will just go down, because they're gonna be more full. It's not like it, and it might not change overnight, right? But it's just a really good place to start.
So makes me think, and I have no idea because I am not even a fan of this body of work.
Okay.
But it makes me think that in that place there might need to be some exploration around like your love language. Like, because sometimes like if you are if you're using words to tell your child that they're significant, depending on what age they are and possibly even what gender they are, I'm not sure. Like there can be a way that maybe they need to feel they're significant by you showing up at things. Like, so it might be like they need you to go to their games and go out of your way to do that, or maybe they need you to do something for them. Like at one point I did the love language quiz with my older son, and it was helpful for me because I just didn't quite know what really mattered, and he really likes when I do things that are, like if I go out of my way to do something for him that really means a lot to him, and he feels like he matters.
That's what I was going to say. It seems like if you do something, it's like it's showing that he's a priority, and when someone is made a priority, it's hard to not feel like that person matters, right? So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, because I think with him, if I were to be using words like words of affirmation, I think when they were young, they really did value that, but as they got a little bit older, it was not really being received in the same way.
Yes.
So I had to just pay attention to the ways that they did know
that's a really good point.
They mattered to me.
Well, and what can happen, and I think not can, but often does happen, is that receiving that very explicit affirmation can be almost too much. It can, and so if a teen or any age I was going to say kid, but really an aged person is defended against that vulnerability because it feels too raw. And then you come in with your guns blazing, like, oh my God, you matter so much. You're the most, you just, that could just be too much to take in. So
yep.
I think the image of like, if somebody's been really starving, really starving, you can't just go, here's a meal. You gotta I need a little bit. You just start with a little saltine and build up from there. It's like, I think there's a gradual nature to this that is helpful, and it could just be, you sneak it in, where you just put your arm around and go, you matter, you I don't know, I don't even know.
Yeah, well, like a lot of people will say now, it's things just like saying things like I just am so happy you're part of our family, or I just love having you in my life, or I'm just so happy that you're, and I think those are really important things. And I think that I think that as we keep having the conversation about it, there is some way that I'm feeling like, to keep going back to that there also isn't a level of action, because the other thing that can happen is that that there needs to be a level of action. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we can also become so oriented around words, and we might be really good at using words, but our actions don't back up our words. And so the child hears it but stops believing it because because we as parents aren't showing up for the things that do matter. So it kind of goes back to like, if I'm always saying to my kid, you're so important to me, I love you so much, that, I'm so glad you're part of our family, but I forget to pick them up at school, and I don't show up at their games, and I can't make time to sit down and hear what they have to say to me, and I don't listen to them. The child senses the incongruence between your words tell me that I matter, but your actions aren't showing that I matter. Yeah. And so there's got to be something in that stage 4 that requires like a little, as we get older, I don't understand exactly how the stages work to know, like, as we get older, if we like deeply entrench that in 4, then is that just great? Or, aren't we always wanting to feel significant? Like, how does that work? And how does it work, like, when you have that child who's like, the 15-year-old who's like, yeah, Mom, I know that you say that to me all the time. You love me. I know that about you. But in his head, he's saying, but like, if I really mattered, you would do this. Like, you would actually, whatever it is,
Well, what comes to mind is there's a way in which I could imagine, if I'm listening to this conversation myself and I'm being exposed to this for the first time, and I'm thinking about my child who's now 10 or 12 or 15, whatever, I could think, oh my God, I got to go out and make sure I communicate that they're significant, right? Mm-hmm. But what your point brings up for me, which I think is so important, is like, if there is a discrepancy between the words and the actions, that's not going to work. And so rather than trying to kind of communicate that my child is important to me verbally, I want to think about, how can I embody my true sense of how significant they are. Mm-hmm. What is the most authentic way for me to express how much my kid matters to me? Mm-hmm. And it might be that I can imagine a scenario, and I'm sure this happens often, where the parent knows that deep down nothing matters more than the child. That's like, absolutely. But I'm so busy with just adult life and work and maybe earning, a living, that it just, the manifestation of that just doesn't happen. And so, but I think the key is that that's not just knowing that secretly in the heart of hearts, I mean, that's better than not having that secretly in the heart of hearts, but that feeling. But the act of communication and expression and embodiment of that sense is necessary for the child to really receive it.
You know what I love about that is that it's freeing, because really everything we do is about embodying it. I mean, we overemphasize words and even like what we think are the right actions, but the truth is that we don't always get it right, because like I might cook. I don't even know why I picked that, because that's a funny one, because I don't. But let's pretend that let's pretend.
In a hypothetical fantasy world. No.
Right. In a hypothetical fantasy world, I make dinner every single night. But let's just pretend that I do. And then my kids don't care about that. They don't really value it. And I think I'm like the person who comes home every day and cooks a meal, and I do this because I love you. But the kid doesn't really care, because they just want mac and cheese. And they're just like, it just doesn't really matter. It doesn't register in that way. So there are ways that it's like, it is possible we do things that don't get received by the other person as the loving thing that we're intending it to do, to be. But they still are feeling our love. When we embody the that we believe, that we feel that they're so significant, they do actually experience that. There's so much nonverbal that happens that just is by the act of us intentionally like owning like how significant our children are to us, and that when we do things, it's actually like steeped with that significance, that energy of significance.
Yeah, and it feels different. It feels different. I notice with my 2-year-old that when I slow down, when I settle in and I just am present, that it's not just that I'm sort of selflessly being of service to her or helping her get her attachment needs met. It's that I feel the attachment connection kind of activate.
Yeah.
And it actually fuels me, it energizes me. And so there's a way in which I think, and there's so much to talk about that we're not going to get to in this particular episode. This is more of an introduction to attachment theory than a comprehensive coverage of it. But that energy, that attachment energy, actually, I think is a big part of what fuels me to be closer to the parent that I want to be. And without that, I think I would be parenting would be much, much harder. So that does it for part 3 of our attachment series. Please join us next week as we dive into what could be an actually controversial topic. And it is about how the parent-child relationship, in order to be effective and healthy, has to be hierarchical. It was hard for me to stomach when I first heard this, but the more I understood what was behind this came straight from Gordon Neufeld, and the more I understood what he meant by that, the more I realized how essential it is, and how so many parents who have a high value of equality and of democracy even, and of respecting their children, miss this nuance, and it leads to all kinds of problems. People are struggling with this so much, so we're going to talk all about it in part 4 of our attachment series.
Yeah, and for the people who think, of course it needs to be hierarchical, even for the people who do believe in it, there's reason to listen, because I think it's a little more nuanced than maybe most of us might think about. We might think that there's either the dominant kind of hierarchical or there's no hierarchy.
Yeah.
And we're inviting you to consider that there's something far more nuanced and really interesting. I think just really interesting.
Yeah, and helpful.
And helpful. Oh, yes.
So join us next week as we explore the loving alpha.
Yes, and if you are enjoying this podcast, we would really, really appreciate it if you would rate it and review it. And also if you would share it with other people, because, the only way that we can all become better parents is really if we're helping each other. And so sharing with someone else that might benefit from this would be really great.
Indeed.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
See you next week.
See you next week.